This is not a podcast for children. This is a sweary podcast. So, are there podcasts for children? Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Like, there's a new one I just heard about. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about a dog and a cat, and they sneak into their
it's
owners.
It's a podcast.
I think that's what it is.
Like pause.
That might be what it's
I
called.
get it.
And they sneak into their owner's office when he's gone and make a podcast. Pretending to be like, it's like people pretending to be
that's
canon.
adorable.
That's
so kids,
adorable. Go
if you're not allowed to hear swears, go listen to that one.
Yeah,
because that sounds pretty
cute.
Get
the fuck out of here, little kids.
Go
listen to that podcast. This is a podcast.
Yeah. I like that you swore
pod.
directly at the children. Get the fuck out of here.
That's how they know. They'll cover their ears and run away.
Yeah, they're like, Mommy, I heard swears from the space lady.
It's cruel out here in space.
But this is not a podcast about a dog and a cat who steal their owners of podcasting equipment. No. This is a podcast where four friends try to amaze each other with cool and interesting facts. Enough so that it will make everyone here, and hopefully you at home, exclaim, "Holy fucking science!" And today's episode is a very special episode of Holy Fucking Science because we're celebrating the birth of someone.
Yay.
Do you remember?
Just be like, do you guys remember who it is?
Yeah, we all know.
That man, myth, legend is Charles Darwin.
Good old CD.
Yeah.
Chucky D.
Chucky D, as he's known by his friends. I found out that he was born the exact same day as Abraham Lincoln.
Whoa.
Which, if he was more sciencey, we might be celebrating him. But since he's not, let's celebrate Charles Darwin.
Yeah. If you can slip in Abraham Lincoln into your fact, bonus points.
Double. What? Okay.
5
Here's a little
bonus.
question for you. What years were both of those men active, as in alive?
On Twitter.
Were they
they're-
like? Did they overlap at all?
When were they verified? They were born February 12th, 1809.
Both of them the exact same day.
Exact
They
same
were born
day
the same
and year.
day?
Yeah.
Oh my
What the-
god.
Yeah, see?
Oh.
Holy fucking science.
That's amazing.
I'm out. That's my
over.
thing.
Now let's talk about cats and dogs podcasting.
Yeah, no, when I said, the exact same day and
That
year.
is awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I know very little about Charles Darwin himself. Like, I know the origin of species.
I know he had a lot of kids.
Did he?
10, I think, maybe.
10 is right,
Ding.
I think.
That's a lot.
Nice.
I know that because I read this thing that some of the I hope this is nobody's fact, but I read that some of the original pages of Origin of the Species are preserved only because his kids drew on the backs of them.
So he saved the drawings?
He saved the kid art.
Oh,
That's
not
a-
his own dang book.
Yeah. Because it was printed, so he's like, scrap paper, and then the kids started drawing. And
That's
they
so
drew,
cool.
cowboys riding carrots and eggplants and stuff.
What?
That's really cute.
That
I
sounds
like
amazing. These are all better facts than mine, which isn't actually a fact. So
We should intro ourselves, sorry.
Yeah.
I just jumped in,
we got
started
excited talking about people riding eggplants and stuff.
Yeah, I like that.
I am Matthew Gaydos. I am the head of co-productions here at Complexly, which means I produce shows like Animal Wonders, and I forgot everything else I do
Animal
right now.
Wonders, I feel like, is perfect to talk about Charles Darwin.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't...
So
See, the
is
thing
Sex
is,
Ed.
I work on Animal Wonders. I don't know all the stuff Jesse knows.
Yeah.
No.
So I don't have the animal knowledge in here. I just make it look pretty for the internet. But I work on Animal Wonders and Sexplanations and the Financial Diet.
I'm Ceri Riley. I am a SciShow script editor and sometimes writer, mostly editor at this point. And my job is to know all the science that goes on SciShow. So old Darwin is a good friend of mine in academia sense because I studied biology. But I found a new thing about him to share for this show.
cool. It's good you're here because I don't know anything.
Who are you,
That's-
person who doesn't know anything?
Oh, my name's Sam Schultz. I'm the producer of SciShow Kids, and I work on SciShow also. Whoa, wait. I'm also the co-producer of this show now.
Yeah.
And that's all.
You realize your responsibility
Yeah.
mid-sentence.
I kind of forgot.
As you swig that beer, you're like, I'm the boss of this show. Brought to you by Big Sky Brewery. I'm Kaylin Hofmeister, and I co-produce this podcast with Sam. Audio engineer is Tuna Medish today.
Yeah.
And then
We all just looked at him.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when you're just listening to the audio
so you
form
know.
of this, there was that awkward pause. There was all just a staring
he waved
over
at
at
us
Tuna.
also.
Tuna.
All smiling at Tuna in
Yeah.
the corner.
That's your name.
Yeah, and I am the senior producer of all the SciShows, so like Matt, I make things pretty and organized and get onto the internet. And I don't have a science degree, so
Yeah.
I'm sitting over on this couch.
Well, I'm on
the
this
science
couch.
degree.
Science.
Yeah, I'm on the
couch.
science couch, which is not where I deserve
You have
to
an
be.
art degree like
yeah.
me.
Yay!
I have an art degree
Oh, I studied
too,
philosophy,
Oh,
you
well.
which
lame.
probably Charles Darwin did too.
I think we need to
Probably.
probably to arrange these couches differently. I think me and Sam need to be on the liberal
Yeah.
arts couch over there.
I took 2 teaching classes. That's kind of
Counts.
the same, right?
Yep.
My
Ha.
writing or media degree is a Bachelor of Science because they only give out Bachelors of Science. So you could
At
get like
MIT.
At
Yeah.
MIT.
You
Oh, wow.
I'm not a scientist. I just went to
because then it's pressure.
Yeah, a
but
school
yeah.
in Boston.
You better be smart.
Well, oops, I dug myself a hole.
Sorry.
But we did do our homework. We always I feel like on HFS, we always undercut ourselves and we're like, well, I don't know, because we're just getting drunk
Yeah.
with our friends and talking about cool things. But we know a lot of shit.
Yeah, and I also think it is that thing of this is a unique situation where we're all brought in and we're all afraid that our fact is not going to be cool enough.
Right, because we haven't talked about it before, so we're
Yeah.
shy.
Mhm.
Like normally it's a thing you bring up in conversation
Yeah.
and you're like, isn't this cool? And friends are like, yeah, that's pretty cool. We don't get that verification before we come here because we want to surprise you guys. So it's like, oh, I think this is cool, but what if I say it and they all
Yeah,
just
it's kind of
stare at me and they're like,
nerve-wracking.
really? That's all you brought? They're like, oh no. Mostly I'm worried Sam's gonna do that to me.
I would never. I would not.
Going forward
okay.
in 2018, I would never. 2017, yes.
I would never
So-
say your fact was bad. I would just
Okay.
say you're bad at hosting.
This whole thing you have going
better?
on bad.
I think that's worse.
No, it's
My
nice.
personality thinks that's worse.
No, it's nice.
No, it's nice. Okay. I
Sam
believe
smiles.
you. So we got to determine who goes first.
Yeah. Survival of
Um,
the fittest.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to think of,
Fight.
like a survival of the fittest competition
Punch
type thing.
fight.
That didn't really seem
They're all
like
mean.
the vibe of HFS too
Who's
much.
the strongest?
Like I couldn't think of any friendly competitions
Push-up
that we could do,
contest?
and so I'm gonna go completely not on theme and just go with
Cool.
a simple alphabetical order by middle name.
Oh, dang.
Fern. It's my middle name.
Alma.
Oh, that is so cute.
You knew.
We both have old
Yeah.
lady
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
Fern
my
and
great grandma.
Alma. Me too.
I got Don.
I got Douglas.
Oh,
Wait.
okay, so that's me before you.
Yep.
I go last?
DOU. No,
Yeah.
I go
Oh.
because I'm Fern.
Ah, heck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Took us a little bit too long to figure out our alphabet there for a second. Because I also was like,
This isn't
no,
an
you do
alphabet.
last.
Yeah.
It's not an alphabet podcast, guys.
So we're going Ceri, me, Sam, Caitlin.
Okay.
That is the order today. So Ceri, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Oh, no.
Alrighty. Well, I was hoping to have more time to figure out how to lead into this. But I'll just say it. So Charles Darwin is known for all of his scientific discoveries, but he himself is an interesting scientific study subject because
What?
he was super, super sick his whole life, pretty much. He lived 70 plus years, so he lived to be a very old man. He had 10 kids,
Especially
like
for
you
that
said.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, especially for that time. But for 40 plus years of it, maybe even 60-ish years of it, he was really, really sick. And to this day, modern scientists have diagnosed him with over 40 different diseases. Wow. And just switching between diagnoses. And now we've kind of settled on 2.
Oh, he didn't
Oh.
have 40 at
God.
one.
No.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, man, if I had one for that long, I'd be really worried. But the fact that he had 40, how was he walking?
The thing is, he was very bad shape for most of his life. So, list of symptoms. These are not all of them, but many of them. A lot of vomiting, farts,
no.
bloating.
Hold on. We have to take this list a little slower, I think, because we're going to get stronger
gonna
reactions
giggle.
like those. Because you led with lots of vomiting. And I just got to say, that's an intense descriptor for vomiting.
And I love that you just said farts, and then Matt and I both just started giggling.
Which, yeah, Okay, I think we can keep going with the list.
You got it?
Flatulence. Farts. Okay.
Yeah. It says flatulence, but I said farts because
That's better.
That's better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tiredness, headache, eczema. It says excessive seasickness, and I read about it, and apparently that means he wasn't just like woozy for one day. Like pretty much consistently when he was on a boat and even when he got off the boat, he had seasickness.
Well, and that's like kind of like
So
a
he
big
had,
part of
like-
his thing. Was like
Was on
traveling
boats and
the
then off boats.
Yeah, he was on
Yeah.
boats a lot. So he had land sickness too.
And land sickness too.
Yeah,
He had chest pain, trembling of hands, shivering, sweating, muscle twitching, anxiety, depression, eye symptoms and visual disturbances, so like white spots crossing his vision, breathing difficulties, backache, which I shouldn't laugh at, but that one was funny for me. Just imagine him as like, oh, my back.
yeah.
They're like, look at you, blah. You're vomiting and farting all over the place.
Yeah, you think he'd be too distracted to notice that his back hurt?
Yeah.
Swelling, redness of the face, and like swelling of weird
I
was
was going to
parts
say,
at
what
different
was
times.
swelling?
It says knee and arm, one leg, but not two.
I feel so bad for Chucky D.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Chucky D was a sad man, I think,
Yeah.
despite his many, many accomplishments.
Can we try to guess what was wrong with him?
Yeah, sure.
I feel like it was some
You
kind of
can.
like
A niacin
some kind of
deficiency.
poisoning or something, like metal based, perhaps.
That
some kind
is-
of heavy metal issue.
What?
That is very smart because that is what one of the 40 guesses was. Arsenic poisoning.
Okay.
So it has been disproven, but that is what scientists thought at one point. They were like, look at these symptoms, arsenic poisoning. It has to be it.
Like maybe somebody was trying to poison him his whole life.
I don't think that someone was trying to poison him. I think it's more like in the water supply he was drinking or in the food that he had. He was just like
Just
consistently being
always
poisoned.
running into
Gotcha.
arsenic.
Yeah, or
Okay.
like long-term symptoms. He ate something that stayed in his body for a while for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Any other
Wow.
guesses?
I don't know. I feel like Sam was on the right track.
I know.
Well, as good as a wrong scientist.
As
So
one
it was
of
like-
40 wrong scientists.
Yeah.
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 Good
From
job.
like probably a long time ago.
Yeah.
Not a long time ago. There were so I tried to find as many papers as I could, and I sent some to Tuna and Stefan. But there are at least papers from 1990, 2004, 2007, 2008, 2013, and 2011 that
All
were
trying to
all
guess.
people that said, this is it. This is the final judgment
So
of
we're
Darwin's
still,
illness.
We're still not probably 100%
conversation's
sure,
still
right?
going.
We're probably
Yeah.
not 100% sure, but I found like the two most likely and most recent things
Right.
that seem to line up. So a lot of the guesses, arsenic poisoning was one of the main one. Consistent allergies was another one. There's a disease called Chagas disease, which is transmitted by insects. And that was another like really popular hypothesis. Crohn's disease was another hypothesis, but all of these didn't quite fit the symptoms. But what we think it is a mutation in his mitochondrial DNA. And so your mitochondria
That was my next guess.
are the powerhouse of the cell,
Yeah.
which is internet joke, but also somewhat truth. It's how your body makes all the energy it needs. And mutations in mitochondrial DNA have been linked with two specific illnesses that describe most of his conditions. One of them is cyclic vomiting syndrome, or CVS, which I thought was
That
funny.
sounds
'cause-
bad.
Yeah, 'cause it's-
Unfortunate pharmacy name now.
Yep.
Well, if you have CVS, go to CVS.
Yeah, it's really easy to remember.
Brought
The
to you by
first
Big Sky
marketing.
Brewery, not CVS.
Yes, clearly.
Send people to CVS for their vomiting. But that's basically what it sounds like is it's it just like you have episodes of really intense nausea and persistent vomiting. So that covers a lot of his persistent symptoms of feeling seasick all the time or at random times and like puking at random times and all his
Mitochondria, isn't that like passed down through the mother too? So like his kids wouldn't have had these same problems, which is why you would maybe think it was like poisoning or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the other half of his symptom, I'm glad you mentioned the mother thing, because someone else used that as an argument for why they think it was a mitochondrial thing, because they looked at his siblings and his mom and found a couple similar symptoms. It sounds like he drew the short straw and was very sick throughout his entire life. But in a paper called Charwin Darrells. Yeah, Charwin Darrells. Charles Darwin's mitochondria. It says that he has a condition called, I didn't find a pronunciation for this, MELAS, which is an abbreviation or acronym for mitochondrial encephalopathy, lactic acidosis, and stroke-like episodes.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So to break apart those big words, mitochondrial just means it's like related to the mitochondrial DNA. Encephalopathy is having to do with the central nervous system or brain dysfunction. So it's a kind of dementia, or it's like affects his whole like nervous system, which would explain a lot of the tremors and maybe some of the psychological aspects of his disease. And then lactic acidosis is when there's a buildup of lactic acid in your blood because of muscle disease. So you like...
That would be the soreness and
the soreness. Yeah, it's the same thing that happens like if you work out a lot, then your muscles produce a bunch of lactic acid and then they're sore. And then the stroke-like episodes are just temporary local paralysis. So if you got numbness in things, then that's what happens. I guess because blood circulation cut off, or because his brain stopped sending signals to that area. So he stopped like being able to sense things. So yeah, that is the other main prediction for what he suffered from. Like the vomiting is covered by CBS, and then MELAS or MELAS is all the rest of it.
Oh my gosh.
And it's all because he had a mutation or two in his mitochondria, which sucks.
How did he go on that boat?
I don't know.
How did he live
Determination.
that long?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back then, with all of that stuff being wrong with him, like living that long is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He like lied about it a lot, I think. So
He got on that boat because he was like, "Yeah, I'm fine."
Yeah.
I definitely
really
won't puke all
hungover.
over this boat.
And fart all the time.
Yeah. No, I could definitely sleep in a cabin with 8 other dudes. Like,
Yeah.
They won't mind at all.
They're like, you can have your own cabin. Get out of here.
That's basically what it sounds like, though, because it says, like, there are journal entries for as he waited for his voyage on the HMS Beagle to begin, he suffered from chest pain and heart palpitations, but told no one at the time in case it stopped him from going on the survey expedition. So he was just so dedicated to science that he was like, I'm not in pain, I'm not sick, I'm not farting, you can't smell it. Just kidding, what's that ocean breeze?
That was a great Charles Darwin impression.
That's probably like an evolutionary defense mechanism from one of those tortoises over there. It's definitely not me.
Yeah, but it is like
That sounded like
animals-
Santa Claus.
He looked like Santa Claus.
He had a beard, he was white.
Yeah. Boom, Santa.
Check.
Yeah.
The science couch says that's Santa.
QED.
Yep.
We talk about Santa like a surprising amount on this podcast.
Yeah, he's a vampire. That
Oh
makes
yeah, I
sense.
forgot
Yeah.
that.
But that is like when animals get hurt or are sick, like they hide those symptoms because they don't want to be weak and like get kicked out. So I was gonna say he's not very fit, and yet he survived. But maybe it's because he was hiding.
Mm-hmm.
So he's sneaky. You get the
Yeah.
sneaky genes.
Holy fucking science, Ceri! That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good way
I
to
feel
go,
bad
Darwin.
for Chucky D, but
Yeah.
Right? Last time I was like hungover and feeling bad. I feel bad that I didn't like plan an expedition to the Galapagos.
yeah.
Yeah, didn't you just want to write like a big book?
Yeah.
I want to study animals.
Yeah,
And synthesize that into a big theorem. Of
Yeah, if I have like a
evolution.
slight headache, I'm like, I don't think I can do anything today.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like doing anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Sit
he
in the
had
dark.
everything
Yep.
and still did so much with his life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody know about this when he was alive?
I think so. I think he started like people noticed when he had to take days because he had a fever or something and had to lay down for a
Right.
couple days.
Or his
and-
leg was randomly swollen.
Yeah.
Real big leg.
Just one big leg.
Yeah, my leg's big
Walking
today,
around.
boys. I'm sorry.
Just don't look.
Yeah, he'd wear like a grass skirt that day.
See, I was picturing like a kilt or something. You went grass skirt.
No, because he was on the Galapagos.
Get
can't wear tight like,
weaved
pants
himself
if you
something.
got one big leg.
Oh,
Really
yeah, I guess it
tight.
depends on how swollen it is. No, I'm saying
Yeah.
just pants. He would wear.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to wear.
You could rock some
grass
Jinkos. You could cover up his swollen leg. No one would know the difference between his two legs if he wore Jinkos.
skirt. Little known fact: Charles Darwin made
Inventor
Jinkos.
of Jinkos.
Yep. You heard it here first.
Yeah, on a science podcast.
Yeah. So I think people knew. I think his son wrote about it. He was like, yeah, Dad was really sick for a lot of his life. And that's kind of how people found out. And a lot of his symptoms are from his personal journals or like notes from his family because he had so many kids. He had a wife. He had things like that. So I think
letters to each other back then.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of freaking cavemen.
Dear Emma, my
Like
face
those
very
literate
swollen. So yeah, I think people knew, and especially as it got worse and worse in life. I think some of the diagnoses were at the time, but we just didn't have a good understanding of medicine. It was like, I don't know what he has, psychosis? ?
Yeah.
Uh,
I guess I ask because it seems like he was such a controversial figure that maybe people were like, this guy's fucked up. Look at him. Look how big his leg is. He doesn't know anything.
He doesn't know anything about animals. I'm not sure. That would be a very good form of slander at the time. I don't know if I read anything about it though.
Yeah,
But if
just
I
like-
was
like
Wallace,
a red face and stuff. That could be like alcoholism,
Like rosy
or
cheeks.
Yeah,
Throwing up,
Full
all,
Santa.
throwing up all over the time. All the place, farting all the time.
always kind of seasick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that being like a newspaper comic of the day, like a caricature of him looking terrible and being like, "We're trusting this guy,"
And he's throwing up on a turtle.
yeah. Oh. I mean, he probably would have eaten the turtle
turtle.
anyways. So
Yeah.
that's true. He ate a lot of stuff.
yeah, he just ate everything.
He did?
He did. He
Yeah.
would study all the animals, but then also eat them. So he'd be like, look at this cool lizard.
Yeah,
And then
that's like a fun
I'm gonna
bonus
cook
fact
it.
for today. Charles Darwin ate
Why
like
did he
everything
eat
he
it?
studied.
He just like wanted to. I think he was part of a society of people that enjoyed eating rare foods.
It was like a curiosity
Wait a
thing where
minute.
they were just like,
For reals?
yeah, like this is not a joke fact.
yeah, like he ate lots of the animals that he studied and like discovered some of. He's like,
I knew about
but
the
how
turtles,
does it
but-
taste?
Yeah.
The society of people who go around and eat different weird animals?
Yeah, and he really hated the taste of owl for some reason. Like that was a fun fact that I learned. But yeah. But then like part of his expedition was like, ooh, look at all these new weird animals I can eat.
What the heck?
Right, because I know that it was like he was like with the finches and stuff like that. He was wanting to like go shooting, like so he would like hunt birds, and that was part of how he would.
And then before he
collect.
popped them in his mouth, he was like, these beaks sure are interesting.
Yeah.
I read about like the tortoises. They brought like 50 of them on the Beagle with them, and then when they left, they were just like, "Yeah, throw them in." And like 2 made it back to land because they just ate
Because
all
they
the
tasted
tortoises.
too good?
Huh?
Because they
Probably.
tasted too good.
I guess so.
They're probably better than like really old rations. Like, do you want
Yeah.
old dry beef jerky or do you want nice fresh roasted tortoise?
This is very
I don't
strange.
know.
I don't know,
That's a tough
actually.
choice.
Yeah.
I feel like if I was eating beef jerky for months, I would eat a tortoise. But also, I don't know.
I would have like named them all and been like, no, not Susie. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I'm next. I'm going to start with a quote. It's a little bit long. Would it be too bold to imagine that in the great length of time since the earth began to exist, perhaps millions of ages before the commencement of the history of mankind, would it be too bold to imagine that all warm-blooded animals have arisen from one living filament? Who said that quote?
Charles Darwin?
No.
No, his frenemy. What's his?
Wallace? Alfred
Yeah.
Wallace?
No.
Oh, I don't know.
Charles Darwin's grandfather.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Maternal?
Paternal.
Okay.
Yes. That quote was from Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin.
Good name.
Good
Yeah.
name, yeah.
Perfect
I
old
had to
man
like
name.
listen to like 2 or 3 videos of how to
Erasmus.
pronounce Erasmus.
What do you think they
Erasmus.
called him for short?
Yuri
Ras, actually.
Ras?
Yeah, there's some other
Whoa.
people of the era that I found out that were referred to as Uncle Ras. And so I think Ras was the shortened
Yeah.
thing. We could bring back the name Erasmus.
Yeah.
That's Erasmus Darwin wrote those words in his book Zoonomia, or The Laws of Organic Life, in 1794.
Shit.
He stole all of his stuff.
Well, there was other people thinking of it too.
His
but
grandpa
yes.
wrote Zootopia.
But Erasmus Darwin was a physician for like 50 years. He was an inventor, a philosopher, and a poet.
Ooh.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I have a creative writing degree and a philosophy degree, so
You're
You're the
basically
modern-
your
I'm like
Erasmus.
an old
Erasmus.
scientist.
Your
Yeah.
grandkid's gonna
Change
do
your
some
name to
cool
Ras.
shit.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
Thanks.
through this, I'm going to actually draw some more parallels between us here in this room and Erasmus.
Oh. We are all
Me?
Erasmus.
You mean you're a Rasmus?
Your Erasmus? No, my Erasmus. Mine is less of a, hey, isn't this thing cool? And more of, hey, isn't this person cool?
Rad. Like Ceri says, hey, isn't this person just heartbreaking?
Weird.
Yeah. This is more about Erasmus Darwin and Charles Darwin's family in general, because
Cool.
I fell down quite the rabbit hole in research for this episode and learned that his family is not only gigantic because he had 8 kids or 10 kids or whatever. His grandfather Erasmus had 14 kids. That a lot of them actually went off to do other interesting scientific things as well. And so Charles Darwin has a whole family tree of like interesting people who are doctors and scientists, and some that were a bit more controversial and don't maybe follow their teachings anymore. But the other ones are very interesting to follow.
Like eugenics?
Yep, that's the
Yeah,
one.
I was thinking about that with your thing, Ceri, is that I was like, well, I know Charles Darwin was not worried about eugenics if that was going on with him and he still had 10 kids.
Yeah, but his brother was.
Oh, man.
Charles Darwin's brother was like super into eugenics. But yes, that book was Zoonomia, not Zootopia. And it dealt with pathology, anatomy, and psychology. He was a campaigner for equality. He condemned slavery. He supported female education and opposed conventional Christian ideas of creation.
That's like super progressive in his
Yes,
time
and
period.
Yeah, like a million years ago.
yeah, it's the like
He was
late
a
18th
caveman.
century while all this is going on. And you read the things and you kind of have to put it in that time frame of like, oh, wow, like for his time, he was really ahead of the game on a lot of the stuff, because some of the ways he talks about like women should be educated was very progressive, and like they shouldn't be taught in the home, they should be taught in schools alongside men. But at the end of the day, it was kind of like so they can
Be good
at
wives.
home and be good wives to their men. And it was like, well, you're almost there, man. Go a little bit further with that.
Didn't stick the landing.
Yeah, did not. But he pushed it further, at least. What I found, I think, most interesting about this very interesting man is that he was famous for his long poems on gardens, technology, and evolution.
Ooh.
And was there's a really good quote from Patricia Farah says of him on the Oxford University Press blog. He envisioned a cosmos fueled by sexual energy and dominated by a perpetual struggle between the powers of good and evil.
Like the good and evil are having sex?
Pretty much. So he wrote a book called The Botanic Garden. It is a set of 2 poems. One is called The Economy of Vegetation, and the other one is The Love of Plants. And The Loves of Plants is pretty much like sexy mythological creatures telling the story of actual plant reproduction, like personifying.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And again, this is like 1789.
That
Boy.
sounds like a weird comic book.
It sounds like an Alan Moore comic book.
Yeah.
How are the mythological creatures sexy?
Well, so it personifies them in a way.
Yeah, I guess
I have
so.
an excerpt that I could read for you.
Yeah, would you?
Yes.
It's harder to read than the other one because it's written in the poetry of the time.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
like the prose is a
So
little
we'll
weird.
snap when you finish. So
But something that really, I'm going to steal a word from this, but it piqued my interest in it, is that they described him saying that the intent of this book with the poetry was to pique readers' interest in science while still educating them at the same time.
I love that. He's writing plant fan fiction.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, plants can be sexy too.
Yeah.
Or put down your romance novels and read about plant sex.
it's like early edutainment, though, too.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
that
what
it-
I was
Yeah.
saying earlier with
Yeah.
the us in this room is like, this is like 18th century sci-show.
Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
holy fucking science.
Yeah.
Get it? Because we're
Yeah.
talking about plants.
Because
folks.
Talking about
metaphysical, so it's like,
fucking.
oh,
Yeah.
and it's fucking.
But yeah, I can read part of that,
Yes!
the romantic fiction. I think this one is actually about some fungus.
Very
Get those
sexy.
spores.
Read
All,
it
the-
Yeah.
all that
real slow.
mycelium.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm only going to read it so slow, not too creepy slow.
Okay.
With eager step, the boiling surf she braves, and meets her refluent lover in the waves. Loose o'er the flood her azure mantle swims, and the clear stream betrays her snowy limbs. So on her sea-girt tower fair hero stood, at parting day and marked the dashing flood, while high in air the glimmering rocks above shone the bright lamp, the pilot star of love. With robe outspread, the wavering flame behind, she kneels and guards it from the shifting wind. Breaths to her goddess all of her vows, and guides her bold Leander o'er the dusky tides. Wrings his wet hair, his briny bosom warms, and clasps her panting lover in her arms. Deep in wide caverns and the shadowy aisles, daughter of earth, the chaste Trophilia smiles.
What?
I like felt like I was like looking at all of you guys, and then as soon as you started to, I was like, I can't make eye contact with you right now.
Yeah, I was looking away from you guys. But that's that sexy plant poetry of the late 18th century.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't learn that much about mushrooms. I wanted more mushroom. Her name was Trophilia, like truffle.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's like saying
that's the sexy
Something
mushroom.
about caves.
Yeah.
To be fair, I
Caves.
think
She's like opening her robe and kneeling.
True.
To be fair,
like blossoming.
Yeah.
I found that on a
mushrooms,
website that was pointing out the more sexual nature and less the educational side of it. I think it does.
So the next paragraph might have been like,
And here is 5 facts about mushrooms.
Yeah. Mushrooms drop their spores. Yeah.
Yes, I believe he received a lot of credit for being like really educational through his poetry as well, which like is a thing I hadn't even really thought of like late 18th century educational poetry.
Yeah.
What?
I like want to make a broadside of what you just read with like mushrooms, like a, that we can frame.
Yeah.
DFTBA.com coming at you. Maybe
Yeah,
that'll
get ready
be-
for that.
Yeah.
Well, they're probably public domain.
Yeah,
We could
totally.
print his poems.
Ooh.
Uncle
It's like-
Ras is totally public domain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a million years old.
Yeah.
1 million.
Exactly.
But I found it really interesting that, like, as much as it's easy to draw that line from Erasmus Darwin to Charles Darwin in, like, talking about evolution specifically, which is, he didn't always focus on evolution, but he talked about it in Zoonomia. He actually died before Charles was even born. And Charles Darwin publicly would, like, deny the influence of his grandfather.
Right, because he wanted to be his own.
Yeah. But people were just like,
Person.
yo, dude, like, your grandfather wrote a book all about, like, evolution and stuff, so
Yeah.
come on.
It's like, I don't think about plants in a sexy way. I eat everything.
Yeah.
Back to it.
There was, I think there was some report of, like, there's original writings from him where at one point some of his writings he had called Zoonomia as well. Like, he was making, like, a
What a
Zoonomia
chump.
2 or something.
Yeah.
So I think he publicly denied the connection.
Right.
But, like, inside, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a jumping off point.
Yeah. And I have just a couple other things about Erasmus that I found interesting. He inspired, at least in part, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
What?
Oh.
Why? Because it's sexy.
No, unfortunately. It's actually due to, like, a misquoting of him.
Ooh.
So in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, in the preface of the book, it says, because Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was based on, like, discussions with friends and, like, a competition
Right,
to
it was
see
during
who could
the,
write
like-
things.
It was during the year without a summer when the volcano exploded and they were all like in hiding from the ash, I think, right?
I believe so.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then they were like, basically, who can write the spookiest book?
Yeah.
She won. But in the preface, it says they talked of the experiments of Dr. Darwin. I speak not of what the doctor really did or said that he did, but as far as more to my purpose. So she acknowledges, like, this isn't necessarily what actually happened. Who preserved a piece of vermicelli in a glass case, till by some extraordinary means it began to move with voluntary motion. Not thus, after all, would life be given. Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated. So she credits him with essentially, like, keeping a piece of vermicelli in a jar. And if you're thinking vermicelli is pasta, you're right. Because vermicelli was not the word she should have said.
Okay.
She should have said the actual quote from Dr. Darwin here. He was talking about vorticella, which is like a single-celled organism that he wrote about.
Oh.
And said, thus the vorticella, which is found in rainwater that has stood some days in leaden gutters, or in the slime or sediment left by such water, though it discovers no sign of life except when in water, yet it is capable of continuing alive for many months, though kept in a dry state.
Gotcha.
So he's talking about a single-celled organism that only lives in water, and then you can take it out and make it dry. But if you put it back in
it'll
water,
reanimate.
it reanimates. So that's what he was talking about, and she was like,
aha! Noodles.
What? I've always heard that was like a different word back then, and that was for some part of your body or something. But she really just thought it was a spaghetti noodle?
No, she didn't. I think she got the word wrong when she wrote it.
What a joke.
Some people have accredited it to that, like the word. No, I'm mixing up the two. That the word that she used also can kind of mean worm.
Yeah,
Vermicelli, like a noodle.
Yes,
yeah.
can mean like the base of it means worm.
Okay.
But really, like no matter which one she meant, it's still wrong.
Gotcha.
Whether she's talking noodles or worms.
Yeah, it's still not what he did.
It's still not what
she was
actually.
just eating a big plate of spaghetti while she was writing the book.
Yeah,
It's like, what if these were worms, guys?
Oh yeah, because they were writing spooky stories, so she did like the
Close your
reach in
eyes
there.
and touch the spaghetti.
She peeled grapes, and she's like, "What do you think these are?"
Those are Frankenstein's eyeballs.
God, I love her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was another interesting.
That's
thing.
awesome.
Basically, Erasmus Darwin, just a really fascinating guy, and I found more interesting things about him than I did even like Charles Darwin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When's his birthday?
Oh, his birthday? I don't know.
That's okay.
I think it was
probably too old.
Actually,
It's
I do
before
remember it was
birthdays.
December 12th, some year.
Oh,
But so it is.
12s.
We missed his birthday.
Yeah. Sorry, Uncle Ras.
Yeah, sorry, Uncle Ras.
Grandpa Ras.
We'll send you a cake. Well, Sam.
Should we do the beer first?
Yeah.
This is
that
some refreshing
noise you
beer.
just made there, Caitlin.
I made that refreshing noise because I'm drinking a Big Sky India Pale Ale,
Ooh.
and it's delicious.
Yeah, I got a Trout Slayer, which is their wheat pale ale, which they recently changed their can designs, which look real cool, but did throw me off at first. I was like, which one is the one I like? And then I found it.
But Big Sky Brewing Company is based in Missoula, Montana, and they have beers in 36 states, I think.
Something
So
like that.
you
But
should
look for
finish
moose.
them.
Look for Moose Drool. That's the one that's all
That's
over
the
the
one
place.
that's everywhere.
I think.
Yeah. If you can get any of the seasonals, like Powder Hound or Summer Honey, those are also very,
Oh,
very
Summer
good.
Honey's so good.
Summer Honey's the best one. Means
We've
it's
got to
summer.
wait like 6 more months of gray here in Missoula till
Yeah.
we get Summer Honey,
Yeah.
but
Part of the reason I think we all love Summer Honey, it is delicious, but also it means it's sunny outside and we get really
Yes.
excited.
So mine's not about Darwin or his family. It's about evolution, though. It's like a tangent of evolution, and it is the evolution of why human beings do art, which is like
We know about this. We
do
about
know.
art.
Well, like people don't really know why people evolved to do art,
No, we don't know that part.
but
yeah, no.
They
But
made
we know
some-
about art.
yeah.
they've made some guesses about how it started. So, like, art seems pretty useless if you don't really think about it that much, or like if you don't make art, it's just like something that some people do. Some weird
And I
people
think
who wear
even
berets.
those of
and
us who
stuff.
do make art think that at times too.
Yeah, because like, what's the point?
Yeah.
But every recorded human civilization has had art since like the dawn of man. So why
Since
is
the
that?
dawn of Homo sapiens or even before? 'Cause,
Even
like,
before that.
Neanderthals- Okay.
I think.
Cool.
Yeah, I think so.
Because Neanderthals, I think, had art
Mm-hmm.
also and jewelry and stuff. I don't know about.
Well, so the earliest
great apes.
evidence of art, at least in Homo sapiens, that they found is body painting and beads and jewelry. And I
Yeah.
assume it's on buried bodies, I think.
Which is
So-
probably why it's like found because it's like preserved in that way.
Yeah, and especially the paint part, I would assume would just be on mummies and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not sure
Cool.
about that. So they found some of the earliest works not created on the human body were zigzags carved into cave walls, and they think that some of those were by Neanderthals. So then that matches up with what we were talking about last time I was on with Congo the ape who can paint.
Yes.
And
I think it said campaigned. I was like, campaigned for what?
he campaigns. He was
Lost the run
president.
for mayor.
President Congo. You don't know President Congo?
It's the emperor of the United States.
So there are most captive chimpanzees do enjoy, it seems like, painting because they'll do it willingly and they like paint stuff. But then a little sidebar about Congo, he, when you compare his paintings to other chimpanzees, was better at painting than they were.
Maybe those other chimps are just like abstract.
Well,
Yeah, they're kind of outsider artists, and
Yeah.
he's like in the
He's more
canon.
traditional.
yeah, he
Yeah.
was selling stuff out
He's
of
in the
galleries. You're
academy.
right about that. But like from a compositional standpoint,
All right.
his stuff looked better than other people's stuff. Other people. No. Other chimpanzees. Probably some people too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So then this paper I was reading, which is by Gillian Morris Kay, said that since humans and chimpanzees diverged like 8 million years ago, then the potential for creativity in that way is at least 8 million years old and exists in some primates. But no chimpanzees in the wild have ever been recorded painting. So it's like something you can only do, I guess, once you achieve a certain level of luxury or boredom. Well, I guess they're the same thing, basically, though. Because you start thinking of stuff to do.
Right, because you don't have to just feed yourself and fight off.
Yeah.
The survival instincts aren't as strong.
Yeah. I got my cave and my bed of leaves. So I guess I'll paint like some boobs or something.
That's what the zigzags are.
Yeah. Then other people theorize that we got the idea for putting images on flat surfaces from fossils that we found of shells and of coral and stuff, because they found fossilized remains in caves that people are like keeping as a keepsake. So maybe that planted some kind of germ.
Cool.
Yeah, that you could contain the idea of an image on a flat surface. So a lot of people think that sculpture predated 2D work because people were like walking around and they saw a rock that looked like a face and they were like, whoa, that looks like a face. And then they would chip it away until it looked more like a face. Yeah. And it actually takes more, I think, of a conscious effort to turn something that you see in the 3D world into 2D work.
I'm taking a drawing class right now, and we were talking about that, how it's like such a mind fuck to go from 3D to 2D, and like that you have to lie, basically.
Yeah.
It's like how like 2D animated characters, like
Yes.
if you imagine them from like a weird like 3/4 perspective, you're just like, oh yeah, or like a Simpsons character straight on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Never
what does that
looks
look
right.
like?
That's not what it. Yeah. That's not my Bart.
No, that's not my part.
So all that stuff still kind of lines up with Congo's type of painting, but what separated us from how animals do art or express themselves, at least the ones that do in the way that they do, is that we leapt from painting those squiggles or working with 3D objects to painting onto cave walls, images that we could only see in our own heads, if that makes any sense.
Yes, not like duplication, not representation.
Yeah.
But
it was either like
creation.
we would paint, we would draw lines, or we would take a rock that looked like a face and make it into more of a face. But eventually we figured out somehow how to like draw a rhino on a wall without the rhino being right in front of us. And that is what this paper at least was calling the development of the mind's eye. So this paper thought that the development of the mind's eye came from our ability to make tools, because we had to be able to find a rock that was made out of the right stuff that we knew that we could chip away in the right way to make like a hand axe out of. And we knew which parts of it we needed to get rid of to have an end result. And that kind of like planning.
That's it's like drawing or painting. You're like thinking about the negative space also.
Yeah, or you're thinking about, I want this in the end to look like a giraffe. So I have to paint this line, and in the end it'll look like a giraffe. So then it also said that the mind's eye is a side effect of hunting, and that we figured out that if an antelope went over the horizon or behind a rock or something, that it was still there, and we could remember that it was still there, and we could visualize ourselves going and finding it. So then we took that back to the caves, and we were like, remember that antelope we saw? Check this out. I want to draw him on the wall. Is any of this tracking with you at all? Science person.
Ceri's just like, none of this is right.
Well, I'm just like, I'm really interested in it because this is like something that I know nothing about. This is something that like Blake's expertise is in. How do you know how this compares to a desire to communicate or at all? Because like, if we were drawing squiggles, was that just like, I like this thing, I'm going to draw a squiggle? Or is it like, I want to communicate something squiggly?
Right. Is
to
there
my
an
friend?
audience intended, or is it just an activity that keeps you occupied?
Yeah. I feel like I basically found two papers. One that said what I'm basically telling you right now, that the mind's eye stuff. And then the other one was that painting on the walls was a way to make people think about hunting animals, and then they would run through that scenario in their head, like, what would I do if I was going to hunt an elk? So then they think about what they would do if they would hunt an elk, and then that paper got into stuff about mirror neurons, where when you observe something or somebody doing something, it triggers the same pathways in your head as when you do it yourself, and that was a way to, like, it was basically like an alternate reality, like, thought imagination experiment where you're like, what if I was falling off a cliff? How would I stop myself? Or what if I was stuck in the woods at night? What would I do? And that these paintings were like teaching you in that way.
That's like it used a lot in sports now. Like,
Yeah.
like practicing your like jump shot, even when you can't physically practice it.
Visualizing it. Yeah. But then the one that I felt like I got a little bit more out of, at least from my view of art. It starts talking about this experiment with rats where you show a rat a rectangle and the rat touches the rectangle and gets a treat. And when you show it a rectangle and then a longer rectangle, the rat's like, I like that rectangle because it might give me more treats because it's longer.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so cute.
Or like these birds that their parents have some kind of gull. Their parents have a red spot on their beak that they learn how to tap to get food. And then eventually they would show them like a yellow stick with 3 dots on it, and they would freak out because they thought they were going to get way more food. But to me, I feel like that's like pornography or something more than it is art.
I took away from your rectangle experiment that McDonald's should start building fast food restaurants that are slightly bigger than Burger King.
The M should get
Yeah,
longer
like bigger-
and longer.
like bigger arches.
It's just bigger than Burger King, bigger than Taco Bell, and people are like, well, they must have more food.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go to that big building to get food.
I think what like is so interesting to me and where my brain kind of short circuits when trying to think about these things is that it is really, really hard for evolutionary biologists to come up with things. Like the thing that my brain was like, oh, red flag was the idea of having a gene be linked to painting or art or creativity or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the 8 million years
Like
ago
that
thing.
Yeah,
the
the 8 million
chimpanzee is better at it than
Yeah.
other chimpanzees, but there's always people who are better at it than other people too.
That's true. Yeah.
So-
And so I don't know. I guess that is where my understanding of how brains work and how brains evolved completely dissolves. It's like
Yeah.
how much of this is a behavioral thing that is unique to humans and that we just like, or unique to primates in general, and that because of the way that our brain developed and happened to morph over time and we developed behaviors that became ingrained into.
Yeah.
That's
Way
what's
that brains
interesting
work.
about the thing you were saying about hunting, though, because that's like directly related to survival. So if you're a good
Yeah.
artist and your family is good at communicating through art in terms about like then planning a hunt, then you guys are going to get more meat, and then your brains are going to get bigger and you're going to live longer and have more kids, and you know, like that's
Yeah.
like probably a leap that I'm making, but
Well, I think what the other paper that was saying was that art is actually kind of more of an accident, and people would see these things and then they would get done seeing them and they'd still be able to see them in their head, and then they'd be like, what do I do with this? I guess I'll
Yeah.
paint it onto a wall. But then they started to, as people got more advanced, I guess, they started to think about birth and death. So a lot of early art is either about hunting, but then a lot of it is about fertility and sex objects, like fertile women and stuff. So then when they started thinking
Boobs.
about that, yeah, or like
I mean
cave
that looks
painting.
more like a rock. Then it's easier to make a little chubby
Yeah.
lady
Yeah.
than-
Hey, look, I made a boob.
I tried to
picked
make
up
a
that
giraffe,
round
but
rock.
it kept breaking. Kept breaking. But look, I made this like chubby boob lady with big hips.
and then a lot of it is there's a lot of cave paintings of people with animal heads that people have interpreted to be some kind of like holy man figure or something. So then that would imply that they were thinking about death too. So I can see like a straight line from once they start thinking about birth and then death, then it's like then you just have stories. That's like
Totally,
from
you
there
have
it
the
seems
beginning
really
and
easy.
end there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the most intriguing thing to me when I ever hear about or like people are talking about like ancient cave art and stuff is like when did fiction get introduced?
Yeah.
And how did like stories become part of that of like no, this thing didn't exist. Like who's the first person to draw a unicorn?
There is a cave painting of a mermaid.
See, that's what I want.
Interesting.
That's
I
really
want to know
cool.
so much about that.
It is interesting, yeah, because it's like you're talking about like humans with animal heads and stuff, like, and like also just like they can imagine that an antelope is still behind that rock, and then they paint it not behind the rock. Like fiction probably was right there.
Yeah, and
with story.
with a lot of these papers, they weren't counting music and stories as art for some reason.
That's what I was wondering about, because like talking about different animals and stuff, like
yeah.
I'm like, well, what about like bird song? Like sometimes they're just making songs. Is
Yeah.
that strictly communication, or is there art to that?
I don't know.
Ceri.
What did they intend for it to be?
I feel like I read something at some point where like birds can put on individual flair, but I think, yeah, I don't know. The idea of the accidental art is really interesting because there's probably accidental art in all kinds of animals that we don't necessarily see as that.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about birdsong, but I think there's things there are calls that we don't understand entirely.
Yeah.
And so is it bird art? Is it just people being like, hey, this is my fancy signature on the end of my call?
Right.
Right.
It's just my email stamp.
Yeah.
Like sent from Caitlin's desk.
Yeah, on the same
Verified
call
on
that is
Twitter.
still,
Yeah.
like, that's still like the
bird.
mating
It's a
call.
bird. Yeah, I know. I got excited about that.
Yeah, I get it. It's a bird.
But like, I can't see a caveman doing a cave painting
Yeah.
and then being like, check this out,
Uh-huh.
ladies. What do you think about my cave painting? Because that still doesn't work now. Like,
Sam's like, as an artist, let me tell you.
Look how good I drew this antelope.
yeah,
Oh, that guy killed it though? I get it.
yeah, it makes
Yeah, I'm
sense.
gonna go to dinner at that cave.
Yeah, that
'cause
guy's
that's where
got the
actual
antelope.
That's where the
is.
food is. You drew a
This
picture
is-
of food, you idiot.
Starving artist. That's
That's why Darwin was in that weird eating club.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's like, we're not making that mistake again. Yeah, you can draw him, but you better draw him fast because I'm going to eat that thing.
But yeah, I like the idea that art kind of came about by accident, where it's just like we started like collecting rocks at some point, and we're like, I like this.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. We just did.
Or we started being able to retain our memories for long enough that
Yeah.
we were just like,
What do
this
I do?
is in my head. I can't stop thinking about this stupid antelope. What do I do about
Gotta
it?
get it out. Yeah.
And then another thing I thought was interesting in one of the papers, it talked about how when you get down to it, the only difference between a still life done with oil painting that would like hang in a museum and a picture that somebody drew of an antelope is like the tools that they had available to them. So it's almost like the human art brain emerged fully, like at least
It
at least
hasn't
for
developed over time. It's just like boom.
yeah, in terms of metaphor, it has definitely developed over time. But in terms of like representational drawing, it almost seems like the only difference is that they were using like a burned up stick and we have oil paints and stuff.
Whoa. And like institutions that can put like museum glass over whatever.
Yeah,
Like
to
that.
say-
Yeah.
So that, that's all. That's just my weird thoughts, my half-formed thoughts about
That is
why
so
humans
cool.
did art. And then, the whole time I was looking at it, I was like, my brain's breaking too. I don't know. It just seems like an accident to me mostly.
Yeah, anything with like human behavior and intelligence, I cannot handle it. Like there are these articles that say like this animal is intelligent or not. I know we did a podcast that I was not on about it, but anytime
Yeah,
we
I got
start,
yelled at a lot because I said they were all stupid.
That was
But,
the
like-
chaotic episode.
yeah, I mean they could be. I don't know. Intelligence is a very weird concept, and we have like all these constructs that we use to test
And we have this
for it.
point of view.
Yeah, and we have like we have a human centric point of view because
Yeah.
we're humans, but like we don't understand what's going on in brains. We don't understand
Yeah,
our
we don't
own
know
brains.
brains.
So
Yeah.
how do we understand anyone else's brains and what to call intelligence or what to call? I don't know.
Yeah.
We're a good happy accident. I
Yeah,
guess.
everything's an accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
We made the
comforting.
accident and Congo made the accident.
Uh-huh.
Maybe someday all chimpanzees will make the same accident.
Yeah.
Then it'll
Sounds
be
like we're
Planet
just
of the
talking
Apes.
about
Planet of
I was
the
gonna say
Apes.
that's what it would be.
Yeah.
Is like tomorrow if like a researcher's like just walking through the jungle and this monkey painted a horse on the wall.
I think it's a mermaid actually.
Yeah, a mer horse.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm doing a talk about it at 7. Come back. the monkey.
Oh,
think
but this
about
guy
that a
painted a
lot.
mer horse. Damn it.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot, and I think about what our response would be, and it probably wouldn't be good, I'd imagine.
No, it would be like put that thing on a stage and pay money to watch
Yeah.
it paint mer horses.
Yeah.
And also, where's this fucking mer horse?
Yeah.
Put that on a
The
stage.
monkey saw it in his mind's eye.
Yeah.
It saw a horse and it saw a fish, and it was like,
Ooh.
this would be hot.
But it's got
Nice.
4 legs and a fish face
Yeah.
instead of like.
Oh no! Yeah, because monkeys don't know how mermaids work.
No, they're like, we have our own mermaids. We're
Yeah.
horses.
You have your mermaids. We have our horses. They're not the same things. Well, Caitlin, what do
Yeah.
you have for us today?
Well, bringing it back to Darwin, I'd want to talk about finches or birds because Darwin's finches weren't really finches.
They weren't? I
I was
didn't
gonna
know
say,
that.
wait, I need to know more about that immediately.
I think they were just like related to finches. They weren't true finches.
Oh, okay.
And like, so he studied in the Galapagos the like beak variation. And we kind of like joked about that before. And this is why I was wondering about bird songs too, because I wanted to talk about birds. But yeah, so we tend to think about evolution happening over millennia. Like you're talking about like ancient humans and then developing to like what we are now. But it actually is a generational thing. Like we're developing each generation. And even now, right in front of our very eyes. And so speaking of fertility, I want to talk about great tits, which is this kind of
Whoa.
bird. Sam was about to drink and then was like, no, I'm not going to drink right now. So great tits are these little birds that they live all over, but the paper I want to talk about was studying them, a group that was in the UK and in the Netherlands. And Louis Spurgeon is the evolutionary biologist like heading this project that's studying them.
The great tit master.
The great tit master. Yep, great tits master.
Yes.
And
Not just the one.
No, you gotta.
And so they were looking at these Dutch great tits.
You gotta make it through this
All
already.
right.
And these British great tits and how they're sort of developing differently. And so they looked at it like on the gene level and they were like, they were not thinking it would have anything to do with beaks when they first jumped into like looking at these two. The gene sequences that kept popping up that they were seeing in about 3,000 birds, the like same kind of sequences that we would see in humans are responsible for face shape. And they were like, no way. Is it all about the beaks? And it just like Darwin's Galapagos finches, it was the same kind of thing. So the DNA that control beak length were under natural selection in these 2 different habitats. And great tits are studied a lot. And so they have data from the 1970s onward that show that in the UK, the beaks have increased in length by about 0.2 millimeters, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in like teeny little birds, it's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And birds with the longer beaked gene variants successfully raised about 1 more chick every 5 years as opposed to the short-billed variants. And then they radio tag the birds, and this is what's cool. So like why do you think that these little British birds are getting longer beaks? These great tits are getting longer beaks in Britain as opposed to the Netherlands.
I don't know enough about Britain. They have to either dig deeper for food or like poke something sharply.
Yeah, like
I don't know.
Harder trees to
Yeah.
get through or something. Like.
It's definitely about eating.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I
here's a
don't know.
fun fact. UK residents spend twice as much on bird seed as all of mainland Europe.
To get into bird feeders?
Yes.
We're
That's what
changing
they
the
think.
birds.
Yes.
no!
We did it.
We did it. Our fault.
Holy fucking science.
Yeah, so they radio tagged the birds, and the longer beaked gene variant birds also with physically longer beaks too. They spent more time in English gardens
Huh.
dining on the bird feeder, and about 50% of English gardens have bird feeders. So they are able to get between whatever they need to get to the seed.
And where were the other
man.
ones at?
In the Netherlands, and
they
they
don't
just
have
don't
bird
have as
feeders?
much bird feeders there. And this is I should say that Louis Spurgeon is like, oh, it could totally be about song or something, but I mean, feeding's really important, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, they think that British people just love their neighborhood birds so
Oh.
much that
Oh,
they're starting
man.
to develop and like be like perfectly matched for bird feeders rather than naturally finding seeds.
Whoa.
which I thought was pretty cool.
Cool.
Headline: Brits love tits.
Great tits.
Yeah, great tits for Great Britain. Yep.
You're gonna let us make that the title of this video? Because I don't think so.
Great Brits.
Yeah.
Great tits for great Brits. I love it.
Yeah, so that's my Darwin related fact.
Man,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
Like
isn't that cool? Those
when you
little
can,
birds.
whenever they have like examples of like evolution, not only can you like see in our lifetime, but also just like that we are directly
Right, that's the
responsible
first
for
one
it.
that
Yeah.
I've like. It's been like not necessarily a bad thing because I don't think these birds migrate, so it's not like they're gonna go somewhere where they like are suddenly like not suited
Right.
for.
You're not
but,
gonna go
yeah.
over to the Netherlands and be like, "Yo,
Yeah.
What up,
Can
short
reach-
beak?
Yeah, yeah, and be like, "Where's your fucking bird feeders? Oh crap!" Yeah,
I'm starving here."
yeah.
Are there certain parts of animals that are more evolutionarily malleable than other parts?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Ceri?
I don't think so. I think there are things that are more obvious to us.
Okay.
So like
Right.
physical attributes are more obvious to us and they change, like beak size or claw
Yeah.
size or like
Well, and like
tail
feeding
length. Yeah.
and sex are like really important because
Mhm.
like so anything like that probably is maybe if there's a thing.
But
that
yeah, 'cause, like,
affects
those
that.
will be the
Evolution on a
things,
like a
right.
molecular level, like we're not really gonna be like looking at them and be like, "Yo, that one has different cells than that one."
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's a lot less obvious.
So it's really easy to see things like all the Mendelian genetics where like the guy who grew pea pods and beans, he was like, oh, this gene does tall, this gene does short, this one does yellow, this one does green. Like really easy things to signify. But like
You mean
mutation
all I know about genetics?
I don't know, like green or yellow, like you can tell the difference between those, they're tall or short, or like, oh, this is black fur, this is white fur. In a lot of cases, genes do control, like there are a group that control fur color or like face shape. Like Caitlin was saying, we have similar things for like beak shape and probably our nose and mouth region that are pretty conserved across species that are just like a single gene can change a couple things, but like your cells are mutating all the time. So
Right, so it's probably more about like your immune system and like or
Mhm.
like poor Charles Darwin. Like thank God all his children didn't get what he
Yeah.
had or something like that. That's
Good
not
thing he
really
wasn't
that
a
visible.
caveman. He would
Yeah.
have just been thrown in a pit because he smelled too bad and barfed too much.
Yeah. He'd be like, "Do you have any turtles I can eat?"
No, shut up.
Here's a drawing of a turtle that you could
Yeah.
have eaten if it was here.
Eat this, dum dum.
I saw it in my mind's eye.
Yeah.
Which I call zoonomia.
Zoonomia, all in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the sad part is that a lot of mutations don't make it to a place where we can see because they just turn into like dead things or things that don't develop at all.
Right.
So it's like there are things that kill animals off, so we won't even see the effects of those mutations, and it might not even be a
That's a
physical
good
defect.
point.
It's just like, oh, this protein folded weird, so the pregnancy didn't take,
Mhm.
and that was it. And so, I don't know. Yeah, there are mutations we probably see more than others, but anything could happen,
Okay.
basically.
Yeah. I also feel like food is that thing that you're gonna have to adapt to pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we, one, pay attention to it, but also two, like that is the thing that changes between these birds is because like they had to adapt pretty fast to be like, okay, well, we can't eat here. And we need to learn how to eat here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and adaptations are basic. Like all evolution is chance. It's not like
Totally. They're
they
not like
choose.
I'm gonna file my beak down to get in here. Yeah.
and that's
And then my
gonna be
kids will have
preserved.
filed down beaks.
Yeah. So it's just like
The one
over
with the longer.
yeah, all the probabilities of like, okay, well, like you said, 1 in 5 or something like that, or 1 every 5 years, like one
extra baby
survives, and that's enough to like cause a mathematical ripple across the population. And so if it's something that could be selected for in any way whatsoever, then that's going to cause a mathematical ripple across the population and be like, here's a little bit extra of that gene in the population. Which could be anything.
What a freaking weird way to do stuff.
It's weird. Yeah. Basically, everything's probability and random and accidents when it comes down to it, which freaks you and me out, but is also kind of cool.
And birds need to invent McDonald's, then they wouldn't have this problem.
No, they'd all be chicken nuggets, those poor bastards.
They'd eat themselves?
Yeah.
No, they'd eat little bugs. That would be chicken nuggets.
Oh, deep fried bugs. dogs.
Yeah, it would be really
This
cute.
is an adorable Pixar movie you just wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man.
The different McDonald's of all
Chicken.
the different kinds of animals.
Thanks for listening to our cat dog pod.
Yeah, we ended up becoming the podcast we said we weren't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on that note, happy birthday, Charles Darwin.
Your grandfather was cooler than you, and you were real sick.
Yeah. Also, Abraham Lincoln was born the same day as you.
Yeah.
So that's
Happy
probably he's
birthday.
probably cooler than you
Yeah.
too.
This is the worst birthday ever.
No. Good thing he's dead, I guess.
Yeah.
Could you imagine people came to your house on your birthday and were just like, here's 5 reasons that you're not as cool as you think you are.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But we do want to say happy birthday to Charles Darwin. And thank you to you guys for being here.
Thank
with me
you for hosting.
being not Hank.
Yeah, thanks not
and
And thanks
Hank.
for
Good
being not
job.
Hank. Phew.
I can't tell. I couldn't tell if that was a compliment or not.
It's a compliment to you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And thanks to Tuna, who's back there running the audio and the video today. And I wanted to say you can go to dfba.com and get some Holy Fucking Science stickers and posters. So for you visual podcast watchers out there, this is the poster for you audio podcast consumers. Sam, describe that poster.
It says HFS in the middle. It says Holy Fucking Science underneath it. And on the top, oh, my phone fell. On the top, you'll see a beaker and a microphone kind of situation happening.
Yeah.
And some bubbles.
And there's also a sticker that is the same design, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Definitely.
So get those at dftba.com.
Yeah.
I have been Matthew Gaydos. You have been.
Ceri Riley.
You have been.
Sam Schultz.
And you have been.
Kaylin Hofmeister.
And this has been
Holy Fucking Science.